So, if you've ever played pool or billiards, where you use a long pole, a cue, you aim to hit a ball that hopefully goes into the pocket. Or you hit several balls and they bounce off each other, and amazingly, some go in and maybe you win. Often, our connection to each other can be a bit described like that. We connect, we bounce off each other and move on, with no deeper, more authentic connections. So perhaps it's no surprise that there's a significant loneliness epidemic in these times in America and across the world. In the time when Christ followers were figuring out how to live the kind of self-giving, vulnerable life that Jesus modeled, the cultural norms in the first century were already set up around community, inviting people into their homes, sharing good and the bad times. And this setting for how people connected to each other is the context for today's reading from Acts 2. A village raised a child, if you like, with life centering around gathering in their homes. No worries about whether the home was clean enough, Williams-Sonoma adorned, or if there was enough exquisitely presented food. No, it was simple. And in that no fuss, vulnerable way of life, people connected. And we read how amazing things happened as people simply shared what they had and who they were. Maybe that's a challenge in itself to us. So let's read from Acts 2. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. The word of God for us today.
So, Acts 2, a beautiful, beautiful passage. There's a lot going on. And I'm excited to share today's message with you, titled Becoming One. There's something uniquely fascinating woven into creation, and it's something you can't unsee once you start noticing it. Across the natural world, you find groups of creatures doing things that are seemingly impossible. Ants form bridges out of their own bodies. Bees make complex collective decisions without a leader, while also, this is interesting, I just learned this the other day, while also pollinating nearly 1/3 of the global food supply. Fish move as if they share one mind, and birds turn in the sky like a single organism. Individually, they're fragile. While each individual creature plays a role in the larger whole, as a standalone agent, they're vulnerable. But together, collectively, they're formidable. And what's striking isn't their intelligence as individuals, it's what emerges when they move together. There's no central command, there's no visible blueprint, yet somehow order, strength, and resilience appear. Not because each one is strong, but because they, together, are aligned. It'd be easy and, honestly, misleading to say that the early church in Acts was just a more sophisticated version of that. It's not. They weren't a hive mind. They weren't losing themselves. They still had their individuality. They weren't mindless drones. What we see in Acts 2 is something far more profound. It's not the loss of individuality, but the transformation of it. Listen again to the picture we're given. All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, and to fellowship, and to sharing in meals, and to prayer. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. This is not forced. No one's coercing this. There's no system enforcing compliance. What we see here is emergent life. Something has so reshaped their hearts that a new kind of community just appears. So what changed? Before this moment, these were ordinary people. They were worried about survival. They thought about status. They protected what was theirs. But after Jesus, after this moment, they begin to live as if my life is not just my own. Your need is now my concern, and we belong together. That's not natural instinct. That is not the way we tend to think as human beings. But that's transformation. That's what happens when Jesus reaches into our lives and does something truly remarkable. George MacDonald, a 19th century philosopher, theologian, and one of my favorite authors, says this, Mr. Bobby. George MacDonald, here's a quote from him. He says this, "The one principle of hell is, I am my own. The one principle of heaven is, I am my brother's." And that's exactly what you see in Acts 2. You see a shift from I am my own to I am my brother's. I am my sister's. I belong to this people. What we see is a unity of mind where they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. They were not thinking identical thoughts. They were not stripped of their personality, but they were shaped by the same truth. The same story, the same gospel, the same understanding of who Jesus is. Their minds were aligned not because they were controlled or coerced, but because they were formed. A.W. Tozer puts it this way. He says, has it ever occurred to you that 100 pianos, all tuned in to the same fork, are automatically tuned to each other? That's what's happening in the book of Acts. That's what we see occurring. They are tuned into Christ, and therefore they are tuned into one another. They had a unity of heart. They broke bread with glad and sincere hearts, and this was out of affection. It was out of joy. It was out of love that they felt for one another. They didn't just believe the same things. They actually legitimately cared for one another. So they shared their meals. They opened their homes, and they had real, honest presence with one another. In addition to that, they had unity in action. It says they sold property and they distributed to anyone who had need. And this, honestly, this is where it gets a little bit uncomfortable. Because this isn't poetic. This is something practical and real and raw and sometimes very difficult. Resources changed hands, security was surrendered, and ownership was redefined. My became ours. And not because anyone demanded it, but because love compelled it. They saw Christ in one another. They saw needs and met those needs. And that changed the way they thought about life and how to live life together in community. That changed what they did. And this is the real miracle. We often think the day of Pentecost, we think of that time frame, the miracle being the tongues of fire, right? We read that passage, we're like, man, that's really incredible. And it is, yes. What happened on that day was huge and monumental in the church, where many people heard the gospel message in their own language. But what's really remarkable, and Luke spends more time describing it this way, what you see is a people from all different backgrounds coming together with a unified mind, heart, and action. Now, that's a miracle, because if you talk to any teacher today, towards the end of the school year, hey, how easy is it to get all your kids to follow directions? To keep all kids on track. My wife is an assistant teacher with 4 and 5-year-old kids. And I'm telling you, man, at the end of the school year, they just want to get out of there. They are just, oh my goodness. If you're a teacher, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's hard to get people moving in the same direction with the same mind, heart, and action. But that's what they did. And this kind of community that can come together and have a like-minded ability to move forward with one another is so, so powerful. And when you look back at those examples in creation of ants and bees and flocks, what you see are these patterns. They have shared direction. They have low self-interest. And they have constant responsiveness to what's happening around them. And because of that, they can survive things that would destroy them as individuals. Now, look at the early church. They had no political power. They had no set buildings. They had no institutional backing. And the culture was opposed to the way they did things. And yet, somehow, they flourished. Why? Because when one person suffered, they didn't suffer alone. When one person lacked, the community responded. When pressure came, it didn't crush them, it spread their message. More so, their devotion to the cause and to one another was profoundly impacted by their shared experience as a people. By proclaiming Christ, they were essentially, think about this for a second, they were renouncing their citizenship. There was no more security. There was no more protection. It meant being cut off from friends and family. And at that particular time, community was everything. Community was life. You grow up together in villages and places. You hardly leave those except for to go down to the temple in Jerusalem. You rarely leave that community, but to basically say, I'm following something completely different that seems outlandish to you, meant becoming an outcast. It meant leaving these things of security behind. So they all had this shared experience together of what it felt like to be an outcast, what it felt like to be cut off from family and friends and everybody and everything that you knew and loved. Because that's what love propelled them to do, to make a difference. And it required selfless living. They recognized faith was never meant to be sustained in isolation, so they couldn't live without one another. They built this community not with a hive mind where they would lose all sense of self and personality, but in this community there was no room for selfishness. One could not thrive in that type of community. And this is something that Jesus often stressed over and over with his disciples, because you would see them arguing about who's the greatest and who had the highest ranking and who was the best disciple. It wasn't about that. C.S. Lewis said this: the more we let God take us over, the more truly ourselves we become. Unity in the church doesn't erase individuality. It redeems it. It aligns it. It places it into something larger. And we are meant to be a part of community. We're not meant to do this alone. I guess a better way to say it is this: the early church had a shared life. It was a people who discovered, I am most fully myself when I am rightly connected to you. And here's the tension for us. We live in a world that leads us in the opposite direction, if we're going to be honest. It's independence over interdependence. It's privacy over vulnerability. It's ownership over generosity. We're taught, protect your time, protect your resources, protect your space. And then we wonder why we feel so isolated or lonely. The early church would look at us and say, you're trying to have the strength of community without the surrender that makes it possible. When a community can live together, actually lives together, and serves and loves one another, no one slips through the cracks. Needs don't stay hidden. Joy multiplies and burdens divide. And the outside world notices, because in this passage it says, and they enjoyed the favor of all the people, and numbers were being added to their group daily. Not because they were impressive, but because they were different. They were living differently. Let me bring it back to where we started. In creation, we see glimpses of what collective life can do. It's amazing, and it's beautiful, and it's powerful, and it's profound. The church, when it runs on love centered on Jesus, the same thing happens. This happens when we surround each other during heartaches and hardships, to lift one another up, to be present in times of need, or to celebrate different milestones and occasions and events. We're choosing joy in the life of another person when we make ourselves present. Centering our lives on the love of Jesus means we're proclaiming that simple truth to one another: I'm here for you. Whatever that looks like, the love of Jesus moves us in the direction of being present with one another. And when we choose to do that, it's an incredible and powerful thing.